you tonight? Check 1, 1, 2. There we go. How are you tonight? Good. I am so glad you guys are here. I'm actually really glad that it warmed up today. How many thankful for a little bit of a warmer day? Yeah, me too. The question we started with last night. How many were here last night? You remember the question about the Gnostic Gospels and the scriptures that have been tampered with for political reasons? The lady who asked that question is not able to be here tonight, so she asked me if I would wait and please answer that question Wednesday night when she'll be back. So if that's okay with you, I don't want to have to answer it twice. Can we wait for her on Wednesday to answer that? Would that be all right with you? Would that be all right with you? Yeah. All right, good. All right, then we'll do that. Take your handouts with me this evening. We're going to be looking at a topic that I've entitled Concentric Circles, and I've given it that title for reasons that I hope will become obvious pretty quickly. I want to put some of those circles up on the screen here. Hopefully you can see those from where you're sitting. And we're going to start with John 5, 39 and 40. Jesus says to the Pharisees, you study the what? Talk to me. You study the what?
Scriptures.
The Scriptures, because you think that in them you will find what? Eternal life. Now what does he mean by this? You're studying the Scriptures because you think that in understanding the Bible correctly, you will get what? Eternal life. So really, what is their source of assurance for whether or not they have eternal life or not? Talk to me. You talk to me tonight. Yeah, their knowledge of the Bible and making sure they understand everything that it says correctly. That's where they're trying to get their life from, their identity from, their value from, their worth from, their security and their assurance. Jesus said, these are the very Scriptures that speak about me, yet you're not willing to come to, what does that say? Come to who? Me. To me, that you might have what? Life. I can tell that you're sleepy tonight or you're just quiet tonight, but let me just say I'm a public speaker, not a dentist, so don't make me pull teeth this evening. Are you with me? This is going to go a lot quicker if you just talk back. So Jesus here is contrasting himself with something else as a source of where we're to get our lives from. What is he contrasting himself with here in this verse? It's important that you see this. What is he contrasting himself with here in this verse?
Bible.
The Bible. Yeah. And most of you, I would assume, think the Bible's a pretty good thing. Why is Jesus contrasting himself with the Bible, putting himself here against the Bible? Let me try to illustrate it for you first on the screen here. We have some concentric circles, and for a lot of folks, what's at the center of these circles is the Bible. It's everything depends upon how they understand the Bible. You can see these types of Christians getting very upset over doctrinal issues because people fight over what the Bible actually teaches on certain topics. How many have witnessed this phenomenon before? And they're so invested in understanding everything in the Bible correctly that there's too much at stake. They can't be wrong. And when you get in discussions with them, what you'll find is these kinds of people, they care more about being right than almost anything else. How many of you have ever been in a discussion with a religious person like that before? Can I just say to you, just whether you're a Christian or not this evening, if you're in a discussion with someone about any topic and you find yourself in that moment feeling more passionate about being right about that topic than you are passionate about the person you're talking to, can you just sit down and shut up until your spirit can get back under control? See, this is the kind of thing that actually makes Christians jerks at times. How many have witnessed that before? Where they'll go to any lengths just to prove that they're right. Get on Christian forums. How many have ever read Christian forums on the internet? Have anybody here besides me ever been aghast at how Christ-like, unlike Jesus, some of us can be when we're arguing over what we think is right versus what we think is wrong. Anyone else ever been aghast by that? And you just thought, what is going on here? And really, the reason is what's at the center. What's at the center of their value, their life, their worth, their security, their assurance. What's in the middle? The Bible. And they've got to be right about it. Jesus is contrasting himself here with the Bible. Jesus would rather, let's look at it like this. Let's erase that right there. What happens if we put Jesus in the center? What determines whether someone's in or out in this paradigm isn't their opinion about what the Bible says on a certain topic. It's their heart orientation to who? Isn't it interesting that, how many remember when Jesus was on the cross? We talked about this last night, but how many remember when he was there and he was crucified between two other people? Who were they? Talk to me. These were the thieves. And one of those thieves was experiencing a heart change during those moments. And he looked at Jesus and requested something of him. He said, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus turned to the man, and what did Jesus say to the thief on the cross beside him? What did Jesus say? Did he say, well, that depends. What do you believe about tongues? Is that what he said?
No.
Well, that depends. What do you believe about how old the earth is? Is that what he says? Be honest, is that what he says?
No.
Well, that depends. What do you think about,
No.
what's that?
No.
Milk?
No.
No.
He's answering.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I thought you said milk. I was like, dude, all right. I don't know why milk is an issue for you, but okay. Jesus looked at the orientation of the thief's what?
Heart.
Heart. And he just said to him, welcome to the kingdom. I want to be very clear from the beginning. We as human beings have an all or nothing default mechanism inside of us. We take something as good and we want to make it ultimate. Or, if it can't be ultimate, we want to say it doesn't matter at all. How many have noticed that? Either it's ultimate or it doesn't matter. It's of no value. This is not what I'm saying tonight. I'm not saying that having a right beliefs are of no value. Does Jesus want us to have right beliefs? Talk to me. Does he? Yes, because those beliefs intrinsically affect our picture of God. If you agree with that, say yes.
Yes.
But do they determine who's in and who's out? What determines whether you're in the kingdom or outside of the kingdom? It's your heart orientation to who? We're all growing towards doctrinal understanding, are we not? We're all growing towards doctrinal oneness, doctrinal unity. But in the meantime, in process, we can have difference of opinions on different things the Bible teaches and still consider one another a brother or sister, following Jesus, knowing that really our commitment to Jesus and our commitment to loving and serving others is what binds us together, first and foremost, above whether or not we agree doctrinally. If you can agree with that tonight, say yes.
Yes.
This is important because if you're following Jesus, there's some certain things that are going to come around. If you're truly following him, and you understand what Jesus was about, did Jesus believe in the existence of God? How do you know that? Talk to me. How do you know that? Yes, because he claimed to be God. So did Jesus believe in the existence of God?
Yes.
Yes. So are you going to believe in the existence of God?
Yes.
If you're following, yes. But notice how it works. You don't believe in God because you believe in Jesus. Sorry, you don't believe in Jesus because you believe in God. You believe in a God because you believe in Jesus. Can you scientifically prove the existence of God? Talk to me tonight. I'm having to wait for you too long.
No.
Can you scientifically prove the existence of God?
No.
No. But have we looked night after night? Have we seen historically reliable reasons why you can believe in Jesus?
Yes.
And did Jesus believe in God?
Yes.
And so we believe, once again, we don't believe in Jesus because we can prove there's a God. We believe there's a God because we find enough evidence to believe in
Jesus.
Who's at the center of our circle?
Jesus.
See, all our eggs have to be in this basket. I could be wrong. I have opinions about everything out in all the other circles that we're going to look at tonight. But I could be wrong about all that other stuff we're going to be put on the board, and I'd be okay. This is the one thing that I can't be wrong about, that Jesus is who he says he was. He is the significant, distinctive clue that we've been given in regards to what kind of a person God is. Now, notice this. Did Jesus give the Scriptures authority in his life?
Yes.
Yes. So if you're following Jesus, what are you going to see? Some of you were freaking out a minute ago thinking I was throwing out the Bible. If you're following Jesus, what are you going to give authority in your life as well if you're following him?
The Bible.
The Bible. But it's going to make you interpret the Bible radically differently than how those people who put it at the center are interpreting it. Have you ever noticed how some people read the same scriptures and get a totally different picture of God than what they do? We're going to talk about why that is in the next half of tonight. We're going to be talking about the Bible. Because the Bible, if you're not wearing the right glasses, the Bible's not a safe book. How many would agree with that? The Bible can be dangerous. It's been used to hurt people. It's been used to abuse people. And you have to understand it correctly. That's why just to say to people, you need to believe in the inspiration of the Bible, that can actually be very damaging in some contexts. What people need to understand is the person who?
Jesus.
Jesus. And once they understand Jesus and they see how Jesus interpreted the Scriptures, then we're in a different place. Then you can look at those Scriptures and they can be taken to a different conclusion, the same conclusions Jesus took it to. Something else that's going to matter to you is love. What's interesting is that people who put the Bible at the center, and praise God for the few exceptions, but people that put the Bible at the center usually put truth. They give truth, and by that they usually mean biblical facts. They put truth, they give that a higher premium than being loving towards those who disagree with them. How many of you have ever noticed that phenomenon before? If you're following Jesus, not only will you believe in God, not only will you give the Scriptures authority in your life, but one of the highest premiums, one of the things you're going to give the highest premium in your life is the principle of love. Jesus taught that love was the basis of everything. And once again, following Jesus isn't about believing a list of things. It's about believing one thing that causes you to live radically differently than those who aren't following Jesus. It's this other set. It's not about conquering the world for Jesus, as I said last night. It's about serving the world like Jesus. It's not about going to church. It's about being the church. The lingo's kind of the same. We use the same terms. But how many can see all of a sudden they're put in a different prioritizing? How many can see that tonight? And it all depends on whether or not the Scriptures are at the center or whether or not Jesus is at the center. And some of you are a little still uncomfortable with that. I would just want to remind you that in John 5, Herb's not the one that contrasted Jesus with the Scriptures. Who was the first one to contrast Jesus with the Scriptures? Jesus himself. So we're actually listening to him when we're thinking like this. And something else that's going to take a high premium is people. Did people matter to Jesus? People were number one. Let me give you a few examples. There was a woman once caught in adultery. What did the law demand?
Stone.
However you understand it, what did the law demand? The Old Testament imposed laws. Did she die?
No.
Now he found a slick way to get around it, but in what Jesus pulled off, did he place people above even the demand of the law that she die? Be honest, did he put her needs and put her above that? Did he do that?
Yes.
What about the woman with the issue of blood? How many remember that story? Jesus is walking through a crowded street, and there's all these people around him, and she's pressing through, and she thinks, and I don't think we really catch the full weight of what this story really says. She thinks, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. And most people interpret that story to say, oh, what faith she had, that she thought just the hem of his garment would heal him. That's not it at all. That's not it at all. You see, the law said that someone who had an issue of blood, a bodily emission, they were to be unclean. And by law, punishable by death, you were not to what? Touch anybody. Are you hearing me? You weren't to touch anybody. So she thinks, well, maybe I could just touch the hem of his robe. Maybe that would be permissible. Maybe that won't make him unclean. Because if you touch someone, they were unclean till evening. They had to be unclean till sunset. Maybe if I just touch the hem of his robe, then maybe he won't become dirty through me, but I'll get clean through him if I could just barely touch him. How many think that's a little bit different than the other interpretation? And so she sneaks through the crowd very stealthily, and she doesn't want to tell anyone she's there, because just her being there was illegal. Just her being there was against that law. And if everybody found out that she was there, man, they'd be ticked off, because they got to cancel everything in their iPhone for the rest of the day, because they got to go home and sit in isolation and be unclean until the sun sets. What a bummer. And so she's just sneaking through the crowd, and she barely touches the hem of his garment, and she feels something happen, and she scurries back into the crowd, not to be noticed. And I love Jesus here. I love what he does. He stops, and he says, who touched me? Because what's the issue? What was she afraid to do?
For people to know.
Put yourself in her sandals for a moment. Jesus says, who touched me? What does she expect is coming? I thought I could just touch his garment and it would be okay. I guess even that was too much. And Peter gives me hope. Peter looks at Jesus and says, what do you mean you touch you? We're in a crowd. Everybody's touching you, God. I can imagine Jesus just looking at Peter out of the corner of his eyes, shaking his head. He said, no, somebody touched me. And finally, she thinks she's going to be punished. So do you understand why she's afraid? She works up the courage to finally come out of the crowd and say, I touched you. I was sick. I touched you. And Jesus looks at her and he doesn't condemn her for breaking the religious rule. He says, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. How many would love to belong to a community of Jesus followers where people mattered more than religious rules? How many would love that? That's the kind of person we see in Jesus. That's what happens when Jesus becomes the center of the concentric circles. Being like Jesus becomes priority number one. You can find this so many times in churches and how they operate. I don't know if anyone here has ever sat on a church board before. I have. And many times the questions and situations are, what is right and what is wrong? In other words, we're getting our value, our worth, our identity from our opinion of what we think is right or wrong. And usually, what we base that right or wrong on is what? What did we originally have at the center? The Bible. What is the right and wrong thing to do here? Well, let's get out the scriptures and see. And in a sense, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to put that down in a sense, but I'm going to submit to you that fundamentally, it's the wrong question to ask. Because when the Bible's at the center, you're asking, what's the right or wrong thing to do in this situation? When Jesus is at the center, a church board would get together, even if they have a church board, they would get together and ask the question, what's the most beautiful thing to do in this situation? What would shine forth the real beauty of what Jesus was like? How many would love to belong to a group, a fellowship of Jesus followers that operated like that? What would shine forth the beauty of Jesus most clearly in this given situation? Right or wrong, what would show forth him? Look at how it works. Jesus belonged to a group that he himself said, you study the scriptures because you think in them you're getting life. Notice what happened in Matthew 23:23. How terrible for you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give to God 1/10 of even of your seasoning herbs, such as mint and dill and cumin. Now, you have to understand the seasonings that he mentions here. In the marketplace, they had the lowest economical value. We're talking about, in our vernacular, in our culture, we would say, in our setting, we would say those are just pennies. Those are worth pennies. But are they being extremely scrupulous? Are they paying attention, close attention, to details over almost insignificant stuff? If you see that, say yes.
Yes.
While at the same time they're ignoring huge things, like you neglect to obey the really important teachings of the law, such as what? Justice for the poor, mercy, honesty. These you should what? Practice without neglecting the others. He doesn't condemn them for being scrupulous and paying attention to detail. What he condemns is them taking very insignificant things and making them of greater importance than the stuff that really matters. How many have witnessed religious communities doing this before? Once again, this is one of the fruits of putting facts at the center of your circles rather than who? Jesus. See, when Jesus is at the center, you're going to prioritize things very differently. Even from Matthew 23, you're going to prioritize things very differently. You'll have some doctrinal beliefs. Put doctrines out there. You can't read my handwriting tonight, I'm sorry, but that does say doctrines. We'll put doctrines out there, and we'll put behaviors maybe out here. Is it okay to have opinions on doctrines and behaviors? How a follower of Jesus should believe and how they should behave? Is it okay to have an opinion about that? Okay? Is it okay to get excited about that? Talk to me. Is it okay to get excited about that? Yes. Is it okay to even be passionate about sharing that? Yes. Is it okay even to get in arguments with other people about it? Yes. As long as you follow one principle. What premium did we say? What did we say we were giving a high premium since Jesus is at the center? Love. Even in your arguments, you're to do it in what?
Love.
Love. Because Jesus is at the center, and you can disagree and you can have discussions, and you don't have to call into question whether or not someone is on the inside or the outside just because they doctrinally disagree with you. See, some of these things in the outsides, some of these things are still very ambiguous. And what I mean by that is when you look at the honest evidence, it could be interpreted either this way, or it could be interpreted this way. And too many times within Christian history, those that have followed Jesus have failed to put him at the center. And that's what I don't want to happen for you this week. We put the Bible at the center instead of Jesus. And then we start determining who's in or who's out based on who agrees with me doctrinally or not. With behaviors, we do the same thing. Whether or not you agree with me on this certain standard or not. How many have seen that happen in modern Christianity today? Especially with behaviors. And the whole behavior thing just blows, how do we do that? Blows my mind. Because I said this once before during this series. It seems that all the deal-breaker sins, all the deal-breaker behaviors, are everyone else's behaviors. While all of the permissible bad behaviors are, stuff that's pretty permissible in the church. All of that's not that big of a deal. My behaviors are okay. And what I mean by that, and I'll strike a note with our modern culture, and don't run me out, please, just hear me out. How many times, once again, does the Bible speak about homosexuality?
7.
6 times,
6.
maybe 7. How many times does the Bible talk about greed? And not feeding the poor? Over 3,000 times. How many times does the Bible speak about pride? How many times does the Bible talk about gossip? How many times does the Bible talk about dissension? And does the Bible talk about gluttony? But for some reason, these are perfectly acceptable within the church, but somebody somewhere determined that that wasn't. How many are frustrated by the prioritizing that you see going on around you? The only way we're going to be able to get a right priority, the only way we're going to be able to not minimize that which is really important and not maximize that which is of little importance to God, is if we start putting who at the center of our concentric circles. This is very akin to the first fall of man. Remember, what was the tree? I've got two verses there. For the sake of time, we're not going to take the time to read them tonight. But for the sake of time, what was the tree that Adam and Eve ate from? Does anyone remember what that was called? It was the tree of, talk to me.
Knowledge.
The knowledge of what?
Good and evil.
Now wait a second. Doesn't God want us to be able to discern between what's good and what is harmful? How many would agree with that? If you agree with that, say yes. He wants us to just be able to discern between what's good and what's harmful. Then why was the first sin about the knowledge between good and evil? It's one thing to be able to discern. It's another thing to be getting your, see if you can catch what I mean. It's another thing to be getting your life from your ability to discern between good and evil. If you saw that difference, say yes. You didn't see it. Let me try it again. It's one thing to be able to discern the difference between right and wrong. It's a completely different thing to get life, assurance, value, identity, worth, security from your ability to discern from what's right and what's wrong. Your opinion of what's right and what's wrong. See, what we're doing when we put the scriptures at the center, we're eating from the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We're trying to get life from the knowledge of good and evil. We're trying to sustain our being from the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve's failure was through a misperception of God's character and who God was. They chose to start getting life from a different source than what was originally given to them. They left the tree of life, which I think is symbolic of Jesus, and they went to their knowledge of good and evil. And this is rampant within Christianity today. We're getting our life from what my opinion is of what's right and what's wrong, my opinion of what's good and what's bad, my opinion of what's good and what's evil. And what's scary about that is you can never stop with yourself. Once you decide what's good and right and what's wrong and harmful for yourself, you will then go one step further and you'll start deciding it for who else? Everyone else. And you won't just judge yourself whether you're on the inside or the outside compared to how you line up with what you think right and wrong is. You'll start to evaluate everyone else based on how they measure up to what you think right and wrong is. Let me just throw one more thing into the mix. Can you really, really evaluate other people based upon your own knowledge of what you think is right and wrong? Do you know their story? Do you know where they're coming from? Do you know what they're having to work with? I mean, the only person that knows is who?
God.
Is God. That's another reason why we're called, once again, not to what?
Judge.
Judge. Just don't judge. You have one job and one job only as a follower of Jesus. Jesus taught us to do one thing. Don't judge, serve. Don't judge, love. Don't judge, help. Live out the life of Jesus' radical, self-sacrificial, other-centered love. Now, I know that causes us to start having to reorganize stuff. I think that's healthy. I think it makes us uncomfortable at first, but I think it's a good stretch to go through. Let's look at how the early church went through this. In Romans 14, we're going to look at verse 2 and verse 21. Paul says, one person's faith allows them to eat, what does it say? Everything. But another person who is what? Whose faith is what? Weak, eats only what? Vegetables. It is better not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to, what does it say? What were they doing? There was an argument that broke out over whether certain meats could be eaten or whether they couldn't, and people can debate whether those were to be food offered to idols or some other standard. It doesn't matter. At this point, how are they determining who was in and who was out? By what they ate. And Paul said, hold on a second. Hold on a second. What you should have put a premium on is what? Not these outside behaviors. What you should have put a premium on is people and, what was that one? And love. And the most loving thing to do is, if this is going to offend somebody, treat them better than yourself and just don't flaunt it in front of them. How many can see the principle there? They were putting something else at the center of their circles. Look at this one in 1 Corinthians 8. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world. And that there is no God but one. But now everyone possesses this knowledge. But not everyone possesses this knowledge. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think that it's having think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. Since their conscience is weak, it is what? Because what does that person do? They look at you eating that, and what do they do to you? What have you just tempted them to do? When Jesus told us not to do it, what have you just tempted them to do? To judge you. Even though you know there's nothing wrong with it. And he says, we are no worse if we eat. We are no worse if we do not eat. We are no better if we do. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone with a weak conscience sees you, with all of your knowledge, eating in an idol's temple, won't they be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. Notice once again the point that I'm making from this. What were they placing in this story? What were they placing at the center of their concentric circles? How were they determining who's in or who's out?
Food.
Whether or not they ate food that was offered to what?
Idols.
To idols. And notice Paul doesn't come in and settle the story. He doesn't live out here. He doesn't come in and just say, just go ahead and eat it. Who cares what they think? You're right, they're wrong, just go ahead and do it. He doesn't settle the issue. Because what's the bigger issue? Not giving a clear understanding of right and wrong. The much deeper issue is that you're putting this specific application of right and wrong, you're giving it what position in your concentric circles? You're giving it the position that only Jesus is to have. And I'm telling you as clearly as I possibly can, even if it's good, even if it's the Bible itself, if you're giving the Bible a place in your life that only Jesus is supposed to have, then even the Bible in that moment becomes idol worship. If you can see that tonight, say yes. Yes. It's vital that we put the person in the middle. Not a book, not a list, not a creed, not even a religion. We put a person. How many remember me saying night after night, it's not about making you religious. This is about a person. How many remember me saying that night after night? Never is it more important in all these nights than right now in this illustration. The person has to be in the center. Look at some of these other ones. Romans 14:21. It is better not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to what? Now, wouldn't it have been nice if Paul would have just came forward and said, no, drinking wine is fine. You can do that. Or drinking wine is bad. You shouldn't do that. How many wish he'd have been a little bit clearer on that issue right there so that you could know what's right or wrong? Do you know why he wasn't? Because if he was clear on it, what would you do with it? Where would you put it?
In the center.
In the center. And what would you start evaluating whether people are in or out by?
Right or wrong.
Whether or not they're drinking wine or not.
Oh, yeah.
Are you hearing what I'm saying tonight? He said, listen, some of you feel this way about it, some of you feel that way about it. What I'm concerned about is not settling this issue. What I'm concerned about is you're judging each other over it. You're determining whether they're in or whether they're out over it, rather than their common love for Jesus and their commitment to serve others. How many would love to belong to a religious community where the basis of your fellowship was your common love for Jesus? And you gave each other room to grow in your understanding on these other issues. You didn't judge someone as being less in love with Jesus just because they doctrinally disagreed with you. Now, once again, am I saying doctrine doesn't matter? Let's just love each other. Did I say that?
No.
What's the temptation? With humanity, it's all or nothing. We take something that is good and we try to make it either ultimate or of no value at all. Does God want you to have right doctrine?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Because it's directly affected to your picture of Him. Does God want you to have right behaviors?
Yes.
Yes. But why? Because we learned last night, every behavior sets in motion an intrinsic result. It's either going to be harmful to you or beneficial to you, intrinsically. So does He want you to have right behaviors? See, please don't interpret this tonight as saying behavior and doctrine doesn't matter. What I'm saying, though, is behaviors and doctrines are not a proper barometer to evaluate whether others are in or out, or even whether you yourself are in or out. What determines whether someone is part of the kingdom, I didn't say Christian religion, I said the kingdom, is their heart orientation towards who?
Jesus.
And we're all at a different place, are we not?
Yes.
We all got a different walk in life. And we're all coming from a different set of experiences, different baggage. And to be honest, some of this stuff is ambiguous. Some of this stuff can be interpreted one of two ways. And we don't need to go around calling people heretics. Realize, no, that person loves Jesus. We're just seeing this differently right now. I think if just a handful of Christians would do this, we would be known as the most humble, self-effacing, not arrogant, but humble servants of the world. If just a handful of Christians would do this. How many would love to follow Jesus like this? How many would love it like that? That's what it's about. Let's look at just a couple more, and then I'm going to have to break for the intermission. Romans 14:5. Some consider one day more sacred than another. Others consider every day alike. Everyone should be fully convinced in his own what? In his own mind. Why doesn't Paul just come through and give us an answer? Why doesn't he just say, well, this is the day? Or there are no. Why doesn't he do that? How many wish Paul would have done that here? Just settle the issue, Paul. Well, if he would have settled the issue, what's the deeper problem here in Romans 14? That they don't understand something about days, or that they're evaluating each other based on their opinion about days? Is that too close to home?
Mm-hmm.
You see, this is the significant difference between putting Jesus at the center and putting God at the center. Does that mean it doesn't matter? No. What it means is not to be given. Is it still in the circles? Is it still somewhere in those circles? Talk to me. Is it still somewhere on the screen? But is it at the center of the screen? See, not even on the screen means it doesn't matter. I'm just asking us to move it out to the periphery a bit and make Jesus the center of our circles. Look at some of these other ones. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not give your freedom to indulge in the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another humbly in what? In love. Paul isn't settling it here. He's telling us to do what?
Love.
To serve each other in love. That's closer to the center of the circles. It's not so much important. In other words, what Paul is saying is this. More important than having everyone agree is having everybody treat each other with Christ-like love even when we disagree. How many can see that there in these passages? That is of greater significance to Paul than the other. He could have cleared it up. Look at Romans 14 again, verse 19. Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to what? It leads to peace and to mutual edification. Now this is Romans 14. We just read quite a few passages from this so far tonight in Romans 14. Were they agreed on these issues? Did they need to get these issues worked out? Were they agreed on them? No, but what is he saying? These are not to be what you evaluate yourselves or each other by. Strive for peace. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of what? Food. All food is what? But it is wrong for the person to eat anything that causes someone else to what? And that's on either side of the issue. It is better not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to what? To fall. 1 Corinthians 8, 1 through 3, and then verse 9. Once again, now about food sacrificed to idols, we know that we all possess knowledge. But knowledge does what? Knowledge does what? How does knowledge puff up? Here's that eating of that tree again. How does knowledge puff up? Can someone explain that? What does puff up mean? Talk to me. Pride, maybe some pride. But I think it goes one step further than pride. Yeah, righteousness, and that's really connected to it. You feel more righteous because of this. What else? You feel right? Bragging. Okay, you can brag.
Judgment.
I'm better than you. Yeah, now we're starting to feel morally superior to others based upon our knowledge of right and wrong. We think we're more in on the inside than they. Knowledge puffs up. But what does he say? While love, what? Builds up. Those who choose to follow Jesus, we must begin creating communities that are not centered on knowledge, but are centered on love. That are centered not on a list of facts, but are centered on a person. In Romans 14, who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master they stand or fall. They will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. You then, why do you judge your brother or sister? Why do you treat your brother or sister with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. So then, we will all give an account of ourselves to God. Every person you see will give an account themselves to God. You don't need to judge them before the proper time. You're called to do one thing and one thing only. You'll be held accountable for one thing and one thing only. Did you serve that person? Whether you agreed with them or not. Look at Colossians 2, 16 through 22. Therefore, do not let anyone what? Judge you by what you eat or drink or with regard to a religious festival or a new moon or a celebration or a Sabbath day. Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, they're based on merely human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom, but there is self-imposed worship. It's false humility and harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgences. We're going to talk about more of that verse as we go through this series. We're going to explain what that latter half means. But what I want you to catch is the first half. He didn't come through and say they were right or wrong, and we could stand up here tonight and debate what are festivals, new moons, and Sabbaths, but what's the whole point of the passage? Do not let anyone what?
Judge.
Don't take those things and put them at the center. Leave them in the what? In the periphery. Leave them in those outer circles. Leave Jesus at the center. Galatians 5:6, Paul is very clear. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. I love this. They were arguing over whether you should be circumcised or not. And the only thing that counts, Paul says, is faith expressing itself through what? That's at the center. Yes, you can have an opinion about whether you should be circumcised or not. But, I'm using that as not literally, but as a illustration. You can have an opinion on this. But are you to judge each other as to whether or not you're really following Jesus by it or not? No. Were they doing that in Galatia? Yeah. Look at 1 Corinthians 4. I care very little if I'm judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I don't even judge myself. Oh, that's a word right there. That is beautiful. Paul says, I don't care if you judge me. I don't care if someone else judges me. I don't even judge who? Myself. He doesn't even evaluate whether he is on the inside or on the outside based on his position on these things. Even himself, even he knows for himself that what matters, what determines whether you're on the in or whether you're on the out, is your heart orientation to who?
Jesus.
To Jesus. It says again in James 4, verse 12, there is only one lawgiver and judge. How many?
One.
There's only how many?
One.
One lawgiver and judge, the one who's able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your what? Neighbor. Luke 6:37, Jesus says, do not what? Judge. And you will not be what? Because every time we judge, we're taking the periphery and we're moving it one step closer to the center. He says at John 12:47, as for those who hear my words and do not keep them, even, this is so wild, even those who reject when the center is correct, even when they reject even the center, even when they reject Jesus, he said, even then, I do not what? Judge them. For I did not come to what? Judge the world, but to, what does it say? You and I are called to be Jesus to the world around us. If you agree with that, say yes. As a follower of Jesus, we're called then to, not to judge, but to humbly serve. That is our mission. That is our mission. Compassion is the greatest apologetic. There is so much work that needs to be done on this planet. There are so many people hurting right now. There are people right now that don't even know where their next meal is going to come from. And there's so much that can be done. Let's stop arguing over these periphery things. We can discuss it. We can search it. It's important. We can move towards it. But are there people in the world hurting? So can we come together and be Jesus to the world around us? Some say, man, that kid sounds ecumenical. Please understand, one of the shortcomings is that ecumenicalism takes this outside circles, and what do they do with it? Talk to me, what do they do with it? The outside circles, what do they do with it?
Put in the middle.
They move it completely off the screen. They say it doesn't even matter. I'm saying something a little bit different. It still does matter. You still should have an opinion. It still is relevance. But it shouldn't be at the what?
Center.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Still leave it on the screen, but just don't put it in the center. Don't allow it to be your source of identity. Who are you? Someone who believes something about a certain doctrine? Is that who you are? No, who are you? You're a follower of who?
Jesus.
That's your identity. And if you bump into another follower of Jesus, guess what? You've met another one. Could you both possibly disagree on some of those things?
Sure.
But are you both stuck? Or are you both in process? Which one? Are you are you stagnant or are you in process? And I guarantee you 10 years from now, you're going to have a different opinion about that than you have today. I guarantee it. You should if you're growing. Yeah. So don't judge on that. Look at the inside and say, oh, another follower of Jesus, and base your fellowship on that. A sense of worth. No, we'll talk about worth in a minute. I want to close with words. A sense of value. We'll close with value too. A sense of security and assurance. Understand? How do you know if you're saved? How do you know? You know, some people will say, how do you know that you're saved or not? Well, what's your position on this doctrine? Do you have this gift? Do you believe this way? Did you have the right words said over you when you were baptized? How many bumped into that before? All these periphery stuff, they determine whether you're in or whether you're out. Your security and your assurance should not be based on the outside. It should be based on the inside. Let me try to illustrate it one last time this way. Let me put a circle on the board. And we've got a center here at this circle. And we've got X's. And we've got Y's. When the Bible is at the center, what you have is a very clearly defined perimeter over whether or not someone's in or whether someone's out. If I could pick out an example, let's just use the one that Paul talks, where he talks about food offered to idols. If food offered to idols is at the center, then basically people are going to be in or out dependent upon their opinion of food offered to idols. And people guard this perimeter. They guard it and they police it. And they make sure everybody that's in agrees, and everybody that doesn't agree is out. How many have witnessed that happening before in religious circles? What happens when we put Jesus at the center? It looks somewhat similar, only this circle is perforated. We'll still leave it as food, that circle as food offered to idols. But when Jesus is at the center, then what happens is it begins to look a little bit less simplified. Some of these people inside this perimeter, all three of these people, let's put an X in there, I didn't realize I did that. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those people agree on food offered to idols. But all 6 of their hearts are not oriented to who?
Jesus.
To who?
Jesus.
Jesus. Now, are they inside of that circle still? Are they inside that circle still?
Yep.
But are they an X or a Y?
Both.
What else?
Yeah, it's hard to determine because look at this. These people out here, they disagree with food offered to idols. They have a different opinion, but their heart is oriented towards Jesus. So how do you determine whether someone? See, before this is what determined whether someone was an X or a Y. With this one, this determines whether someone's an X or a Y. How many see this happening? Whether you want to admit it's true or not, how many see this happening already? You know, within the church, there are some people who are an X and some people who are a Y. Even though they all agree doctrinally, some people are an X, some people are a Y. How many have noticed that? I'm just asking that we stop pretending like this isn't how it is, and we start admitting that this really is how it is, and we start living in it. What determines whether you're in or not out is not what you believe on the circle. It's what you believe on the center of the circle. And you can be in process on that other stuff. And you can be any place on the screen as long as your heart is oriented towards Jesus. And you know, if you're following Jesus, we all may be at a different place in that, but I guarantee you we're all going to end up at the same place. We're all going to end up at Jesus. We're all going to end up together one day. So we really do need to start learning how to get along today. Amen? And when we get to the age to come, we're all going to say, man, I didn't understand anything back then. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for having patience with me. How many realize that? When you get to the age to come, you're going to look back and say, man, I didn't understand anything compared to now.
I read that today.
Yes, exactly. Some of us are there now saying, man, I don't know anything. Yeah, that's Paul. To him who says he knows anything, he knows nothing as he yet should. Yes, absolutely. Now I want to close with this last one. We talked about value and worth. Let's clear the screen. Talk about value and worth. How do you know how much your house is worth this evening? How do you know that? You guys had the same housing crisis up here that we've had down in the States, and your home price has done this up here at all? Yes? No? Not as drastic. Yeah, I can sympathize with that. I live in West Virginia. We haven't really felt the effects of the recession either. We started out with nothing, and we've got most of it left. I think our houses actually went up in the recession. But we have friends in some of those higher places like Colorado and California that have felt it. But think about it. How do you know how much a house is worth? It's not objective. It's very subjective. How do you know how much a house is worth?
Depending how much one is willing to pay for it.
It's not how much you paid for it. No, no. Some people are upside down there. It's how much someone else is willing to what?
Pay for it.
Let's say you're an artist and you paint a work of art. How do you know how much that work of art is worth?
willing to pay for it.
It's how much someone's willing to pay for it. How do you know, let's say you have a vehicle you want to sell. How do you know how much that vehicle is worth? It's how much someone's willing to pay for it. Now, hold that for just a moment, and let me ask you this over here, separate but related. How much would you say God is worth?
Inestimable.
Don't say how much you're willing to pay for him, because you can't buy him. Can you even measure how much God is worth?
No.
So you would have to say he has unmeasurable, inestimable worth. If you agree with that so far, say yes.
Yes.
Now watch this. How much was God willing to pay to get you? How much was he willing to give to get you? Just as you are right now, regardless of what your doctrinal positions are or your behaviors are, right now, just as you are, how much was he willing to pay for you?
He gave himself.
Everything. Everything. Do you know what that means? The God of this universe has appraised you with a certain value. He has appraised every one of you right now as having unmeasurable worth, inestimable worth. Right now, where you're seated in that chair tonight, you could not possibly be more loved, or more wanted, or more valued than you are right now. And you say, but Herb, I've done this, and Herb, I've done that. Stop putting that at the center of your circle. Stop letting that define you. What should define us is what God says to us about ourselves on the cross. That you, to him, were of unmeasurable worth. How many would love to belong to a community where you could share things with each other? And I'm talking about a big one. I'm talking about small groups. Because remember the early church? Wasn't the big institutional churches like we have today. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with them. I'm just saying that's not what it was. They were small groups. They met in houses. They were close-knit communities. They were 15, 20 people that were coming together to worship. And church wasn't something they did once a week. Church was what they were. They were the church. They went out and turned the world upside down with how they self-sacrificially loved and served others with a humility that considered others better than themselves, even the ones that they saw as doing things they didn't agree with. They ascribed to them unmeasurable worth, just like Jesus did on the cross. These close-knit communities, how many of you would love to belong to a small, close-knit group of Jesus followers who you could literally tell them anything you're struggling with intellectually, a doctrine you're wrestling with, or a behavior that you're struggling with, and you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that that's not going to change anyone in that person's opinion of you one bit. That their opinion of you is not based on where you land on the outside circle. It's where you land on the inside circle. They say, this person loves Jesus. This person is committed to Jesus. He's struggling, he's growing, he's processing, he's maturing. But this person also, God has said, is of unmeasurable worth. And so my opinion of you is his opinion of you, regardless of what you're believing right now or how you're behaving right now. How many would love to be a part of a group like that? Do you know the only way you're going to be a part of a group like that?
When we die.
It's if we start creating groups like that. We've got to be groups like that. We can't go looking to find them. How many are frustrated trying to find a group like that? Be honest. You can't find them. So when you can't find them, you got to make them. That's the first order of business for those who want to follow Jesus. We need to start creating communities. Even if it's only 10, 15, 20 people, fellowships. Small groups is what some people call them. We've got to start creating them where people's opinion of each other is not based on where they're at doctrinally or behaviorally. Their opinion of each other is based upon what God said about them on the cross. How many wants to go to be interested in a group like that? We're going to give you opportunities to pursue that. It's not structured. We're going to give you an opportunity to pursue that before this week is over. It's all voluntary. It's nothing scary. It's just those that would like. We need to start forming. And I know people use these terms, and I don't know what the right term is. I'm afraid to call it a support group because that's got bad, baggage with it. And I'm afraid to call it this. I'm afraid to call it. But we need to start creating fellowships where we can support each other and help each other grow in our following of Jesus. So that's the first half of tonight. For the rest of the series, I'm going to be sharing with you some opinions I have on the outside of the circles. We're going to be talking about some doctrines. We're going to be talking about some behaviors. We started that last night. How many noticed that? How many noticed? Yeah. Some of you do. We're going to be talking about some of those things. I have certain opinions about them. I feel very passionately about them. I want you to know you are free to disagree with me. I'm not going to evaluate you. You're not going to evaluate me. But the whole purpose of it is helping us get a better picture of who? All of us together are committed to Jesus, are we not? And we all just want to have the same picture of God Jesus did. So we're going to be talking about some of those things, but don't you for 1 minute think that I'm taking those things and putting them at the center of the circle. No. Are they still on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, but that's all they are. They're just on the screen. At the center of the circle, I have spent every night up until this point talking about the person at the center of this circle. Now I want to start branching out. Tomorrow night we're going to be talking about people. What does it mean to be a part of Jesus' kingdom? The kingdom he came to establish. Jesus didn't come to establish a religion. He came to start a revolution. Amen? What does it mean to be part of the kingdom that Jesus came to establish? Christ's kingdom. What does that really mean? What does it look like? We're going to start talking about some of that. Tonight we're going to, the second half, we're going to be talking about the Bible. I'm going to give you some tools. How many would like to be able to read the Bible in such a way that it didn't damage you relationally, but it actually helped you relationally? See, the Bible has been so twisted by so many that some people have heard that teach the Bible being taught in such a way that they can't even open the Bible without it doing relational damage between them and God. Jesus gave the Bible authority in his life, but he had to look at it in a certain way for it to be able to bring a correct picture of God rather than a wrong picture of God. We're going to be looking at in the next half. We're going to start branching out and looking. My opinion of the Bible is one of those things that's in the next circle out. Did Jesus give the Bible authority in his life? Yes. So as a follower of Jesus, should we give the Bible authority in our life? But notice, I don't believe in Jesus because I believe in the inspiration of the Bible. I give the Bible a certain place in my life because I'm following who? Jesus. Jesus is at the center.